I know what you're thinking. This guy's not entitled to an opinion because he's going to defend Dawn of War's worst expansion. I can already hear the keyboards clacking in the comments. Why in the world would we let you say your piece? Trash take. But before you crucify me for heresy, hear me out for a sec. Alright, maybe more than a sec, but please, hear me out. I will concede that Soulstorm probably isn't the best representation of a great 40k experience. The campaign was trash, adding flyers wasn't the best execution, but it was definitely an entertaining window into the universe. For context, a bit of backstory about myself. I was a teenager when I first played Soulstorm. Before this, I had no prior experience to Dawn of War or even Warhammer 40k for that matter. Much like a lot of kids my age, I was into a lot of video games, but for RTSs in particular, I've already been initiated into the genre with games like StarCraft Brood War, Age of Empires 2, Battle Realms, Warcraft 3, and Red Alert 2. I never really got into getting good at any of those games, but me and my friends at the time had a passing interest in them. We'd sometimes talk about possible strategies, repeat funny voice lines, and we just enjoyed the games. All of that changed, however, when me and my friends discovered Soulstorm. Let me go on a tangent for a bit first. I swear, this'll be important. I never had the best computers growing up. I remember one Christmas, a relative gifted me Transformers, the movie, the game. I excitedly ran to my computer to install the game, cause Bayformers in the comfort of your own home, they're a kid like me, dream come true. It ran like dog shit. 16 frames per second on my dinky little PC. Because I didn't own much, I was happy enough that it at least ran, but even my innocent young self knew that this was not how you're supposed to play video games. Because obviously, not being able to see what you were playing, or rather, only being able to see what you're playing very slowly, sucked. So of course, I would seek my gaming elsewhere. After school, me and my friends would go to an internet cafe to play video games. We'd spend entire afternoons playing Call of Duty Modern Warfare, the good one, over LAN, and it'd be hectic and fun. People complain about martyrdom and grenade launchers, the whole kit and caboodle. We also experimented with other multiplayer games that had good LAN gameplay. But this isn't a video about how Call of Duty changed my life, oh no. I'd probably be worse off if that happened. So of course, at this point, one of us discovered Dawn of War Soulstorm. Obviously, you all read the title. It started with pure curiosity. A new RTS we've never heard of at this point? An interesting sci-fi setting? Nuns with flamethrowers? Sign us up! The game was pretty interesting too, because as far as I know, it was the first RTS I've played that units aren't made in single units, but in squads. This caught me off guard, as because I was used to each model being a single controllable entity, I was used to just clumping everything together and ordering everything to attack a general direction. On top of that, I was extremely surprised at how huge orc squads would get when you bump up one squad's numbers. We'll talk about them later. Because there were almost as many factions as I had friends who played the game with me, as if we were all psychically linked, we collectively decided that each one of us would play only one or two factions, and that there would be no overlap. Friend A got very tactical with Space Marines, Friend B younged his bunga with Orcs, Friend C swarmed the rest of us with the Imperial Guard, so on and so forth. As for me, I eventually alternated between the Sisters of Battle and the Necrons. The Sisters jived with me well because purging things in holy fire is extremely fun. And Battle Nuns! Man, what a concept. My teen brain blew up due to how cool of an idea that was. And of course, I played the Necrons because they were probably the easiest race to play. Literally just make a Necron Lord, a warrior squad, A-move them into your opponent's base, keep the squad reinforced and topped up, and watch your enemies struggle to put the funny robot zombies back in the dirt. But the Sisters, though. There was something about them that I just couldn't put my finger on. They creeped me out. Just outright, there was something off about them. So, more tangent time. I was raised Catholic. Tangent over. So yeah, looking at these pious nuns were setting off alarm bells in my head. The wrong ones. These sisters are pretty culty, I told myself.
We command dread and awe, witchcraft, heresy, and mutation.
Wait a second. Are they the bad guys? They can't be. Can they be? I mean, aren't they allied with the Imperium of Man and the Space Marines and the Imperial Guard? They're the poster girls of the expansion. Am I missing something? So one day, I decided to try out the poster boys of the franchise, the Space Marines, just so I can confirm my suspicions. Sure enough, monasteries, chapel barracks, a machine cult, blessed is the mind too small for doubt, a suspicious mind is a healthy mind. These guys are brainwashed cultist super soldiers. I mean, in hindsight, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. But as a Catholic teenager, you have to understand. This was quite the revelation. How many other lies have I been told by the Council? Because if the good guys aren't actually good guys, what the fuck is chaos? How awful are things in this God Emperor forsaken universe, where humanity has to resort to follow this government-mandated religion or die is the alternative to being possessed by the literal devil? The worst part was, I was starting to realize that this was the only way humanity was going to survive in a galaxy like this. It was either conform to a fascistic church state or keep your humanity and free will and risk getting tainted by chaos. Oh, you thought those good ideas you had for overthrowing the government were your own? Nope. The little whispers in the back of your head were the dark gods, and now you've inadvertently doomed the planet you live in to damnation. But what if joining chaos was actually the real freedom from the shackles of the fascism of the Imperium? No. Chaos actually sucks. But I get it though. The Imperium sucks too. Here's the thing though. The moment I was granted this revelation was also the moment I fell in love with this setting. No one explicitly told me that the Imperium of Man was a fascistic theocracy of space racists, but what I gleaned from the things they say, how they posture themselves, the quotes in the menu screen, all pointed to that. And if you had no media literacy, you'd go, hell yeah, Space Marines, and blast aliens and have a good time. But my epiphany that the Imperium were evil made me go, hell yeah, Space Marines, and blast aliens and have an even better time. Because this setting is bonkers. Actually, it was still more hell yeah, Sisters of Battle and burn aliens, but I digress. And so I was hooked on the setting. Trouble was, Soulstorm is obviously not the repository of knowledge that I wanted. Heck, the campaign was bare bones as all hell. You did not have a story, it was just, 9 factions are here, and now there's war for these planets, have fun. So I had to go elsewhere, quench my thirst for knowledge. Knowledge is power, after all, so it's probably well guarded. As it turns out, it wasn't that well guarded. At the time, the Lexicanum Wiki was already a thing, but I found it boring, so of course I went with the other alternative at the time, 1D4chan, rest in peace, welcome back 1D6chan. I got to learn some of the important basics, like the Horus Heresy, that the orcs are actually mushrooms, and how the Eldar got to where they were in the current day was literally the worst thing to ever happen in the history of ever. Murder fucking a chaos god into being? Damn, that sucks. Of course, I also got to learn about the classic funnies, like Ursakar E. Creed being a tactical genius, Doom Rider, Sly Marbo, Karn being a pretty swell guy, and the Angry Marines. Yes, I am old. Sue me. However, there weren't many games back then that could satiate my need for more 40k content. Because I was a kid, I wasn't well off enough to afford buying the minis for the tabletop game, and neither were my friends, so we were content enough with playing Soulstorm for the foreseeable future. A year later, Dawn of War 2 dropped, and my friend group all tried playing it, but the focus on smaller scale battles and the lack of factions put most of us off the game. Great campaign though, I can't fault Relic Entertainment for that. And so it was back to the Soulstorm mines for me and my friends. And for me specifically, my newfound love for 40k finally pushed me over the edge to try all the races the game had to offer. So, in no particular order, These were, to the best of my knowledge, my first thoughts about each of the factions. Space Marines are bland, but great. Bland in the way that they're just alright as an RTS faction. Nothing really stands out about them, they're just overall good at anything they do. But they're also great in that, as I said, they're good at anything they do. They're not standout in one particular way or another, but they're so versatile you'd be hard-pressed to fail if you pick them up. I guess deep striking is probably their shtick, but that adds more to their versatility than anything. The most standout unit I associated with them as a newcomer was the Dreadnought. It's not because of its performance. It's just that I thought it was super fucking metal, that a mech I first thought was just a regular piloted mech was actually a walking sarcophagus for a dying space marine. Nothing says grimdark like an armored mobility scooter with an IV drip attachment to go alongside its metal claws and flamethrower. Let's talk orcs. At first, I thought orcs were a literal joke faction. Not because they're the joke faction that doesn't take the setting seriously, because that's literally what they are, but I thought they were trash. As a horde faction, it felt like they were melting way too much under the weight of my SOB's flamers. That's Sisters of Battle for you, you son of a bitch. However, I learned the hard way that you shouldn't count the boys out, cause my friend drowned me and my allies in a green tide after he managed to keep a relic point out of our hands and eventually teched up to a squigoth. We didn't stand a chance. They were far too numerous, they hit too hard, and the squigoth was a monster. Literally. I like flash gits cause they's the shootiest. Can't ever go wrong with more Daka. Now, Tau. I'm actually a huge fan of them. A reasonable faction lore-wise who isn't actually out to murder every single living thing in the galaxy. And they use modern military tactics? By that I mean they're smart enough to know that shooting at something and making sure to kill it before it gets to melee range is probably gonna net you results. Fucking mech suits? The Tau are awesome, dude. I know that at some point there were people out there who think that they don't belong in the grim dark universe of 40k, but I barely hear that sentiment these days. But their noble bright tendencies are a good fold to the rest of the setting. Makes it more fun to watch them struggle against the oppression of the Milky Way and its denizens. Case in point, the first time the Tau Empire discovered Imperial Titans, they thought that it was just propaganda and that they were probably just statues. And then the mountains started walking towards them. Anyway, I like the scrawny blue cow people. Speaking about alien factions I like the space elves, even though they do have the propensity to hurl slurs at me and the rest of the human race. I find it funny that they're marketed as one of the factions that specialize in hit and run tactics and subterfuge, but my tiny brain was way too small for that kind of playstyle, so I instead went for brute forcing engagements by making Dark Reapers, Fire Dragons, making each control group attack the appropriate target, sprinkle a few Howling Banshees and Guardians in there to distract any melee assault squads for getting to my back line, and then accelerate the murder if I get my Avatar of Cain out. I also heard they're the most powerful race in Soulstorm? Wouldn't know. Never played this game competitively, just dicked around with friends in the past like I said. But I guess that power is lore accurate since they used to rule the galaxy for tens of millions of years before humanity ever came into the picture. Murder fucking a chaos god into existence and suffering the ill effects of that for the rest of the millennia they've survived is peak grimdark. But the Craft World Eldar aren't to blame for this though. That would be the Dark Eldar. And they're the Eldar, but spiky and evil. And boy oh boy do I not jive with them. At first I thought I did. I loved playing Protoss back in Brood War. Still am a Protoss player in StarCraft 2 actually. I really liked how I could just drop a building somewhere and then ignore it until it finishes warping in. Apart from that, these assholes have nothing remotely similar to how the Protoss play, so I'm not really sure why I bothered comparing them. They're a glass cannon hit-and-run faction where most, if not all of their units hit like a freight train, move slightly faster than the other races, but have chip Xanath health bars. I think it's because they're space elves but evil TM that really turns me off on the Eldar. Not to mention the fact that they're the pricks who birthed Slanesh, the chaos god of excess and pleasure, into existence. And to stop she who thirsts from devouring their souls because of the inherent connection to the god they created, they decided to double down on the murder and debauchery to replenish their souls. Fucked up. Definitely ain't for me. I guess it's kinda cool that they can collect souls in the battlefield to power global spells. Play them if you want to be a dick to everyone else, I guess. And speaking of chaos gods, Chaos. Subscribe for that segue. Actually, just subscribe in general, please. I'm kind of desperate. Anyway, Chaos Space Marines. They're like Space Marines, but spiky and evil. They decided to worship the Chaos Gods and turn away from the Imperium because of course they did. And I can't blame them. The Imperium sucks, like I said. And unlike the Deldar, I actually like them. About as much as I like the Space Marines, in fact. In the game, as the faction can kinda tell you, they're like the Space Marines, but more chaos. And by that, I mean they're a bit more aggressive. They still have strong elite infantry that you mostly want to keep alive because they're just solid overall like their loyalist cousins. As far as I know, Space Marines and Chaos Marine squads are almost statistically the same. The key difference is crime. After buying an upgrade, you can turn the Chaos Boys invisible. It's an absolute crime to have dudes clad in Abrams tanks worth of armor each walk around stealthily. They've got demons, mutants, and corn berserkers, and just overall pretty solid. Metal boxes. The Sisters of Battle. I don't know, my segue powers just kinda died thinking up the last one for Chaos. But yes, the poster girls for Soulstorm, my main race. If you have eyes, you don't need me to explain why they're so fucking cool as a faction. But I'm going to tell you anyway, because this is my video. Nuns with guns is probably one of the best things that fiction has ever given us. Nuns with flamethrowers is even better. I mean, sure, the self-flagellating Sister Serpentia isn't the most flattering of images, but I know what most of you are thinking. I can fix her. No. No, you can't. You'd probably be burning on a stake long before you fix her. I like the funny pipe organ artillery tank. Things explode while holy hymns play in your backline, and doesn't that just scream religious fervor to you? The Necrons, the other race I made meanwhile, are Arnie's metal insides, but they're also undead. They've also got a nice ancient Egyptian mummy flavor to them, so that's cool. They have the best tier 1 infantry out of all the races, dishing out so much damage and taking it as much as they're dealing it, with the caveat being that they move like a molasses flood. But just because they move slow doesn't mean they aren't a major threat. Just Google the Boston molasses flood of 1919 and you'll see what I mean. If you let the Necrons do their thing, they're a disaster waiting to happen. Unfortunately, this was at the point in time when GW didn't give them any personality, just undead robot who hates all life. But their lore got so much better after. Please read The Infinite and the Divine. It's a great book. 2 ancient robots bickering like an old married couple is entertaining and hilarious. And last, but definitely not the least, is the Imperial Guard. The actual backbone of the Imperium of Man. Fuck you, Space Marines, affectionate. The Guard are a horde army that gets better as the game progresses. They can be a good army, composed of infantry with some armored support. You can upgrade your guardsmen's glorified flashlights to become either grenade launchers or plasma guns, boost their stats with priests and commissars, and give them support with tanks, transports, and walkers. And if you really want to say fuck you, or more accurately, to whom it may concern, to your lovely neighbors, get basilisks to rain fire from 3 zip codes away. Optionally, you can forego the ground troops entirely and instead go full mechanized army with Lehman Russ battle tanks and a Baneblade if you tech up enough. Regardless of how you play them, the Guard are as versatile as they are numerous. Here's the thing though. Throughout my stint with playing Soulstorm and learning about 40k, I thought it was a damned shame that we couldn't try out other cool factions that were in the lore but weren't playable in the game. Seeing as it was the last expansion for Dawn of War, there was no longer a chance to play the all-consuming Tyranids, or the elusive and mysterious Eldar Harlequins, or the techno-theocracy of the Adeptus Mechanicus, my favorite human faction, or my favorite Imperial Guard sub-faction, the Death Corps of Krieg. Such a shame. This has got to be the worst fake out ever. Of course you know this video is still going. I literally had a timestamp for how long this video is going to be. I trust that as an audience you don't have the attention span of a goldfish. And besides, it wouldn't be fair to talk about Soulstorm without talking about the Unification mod. Or Ultimate Apocalypse, but Mandalore Gaming has a video all about that, so go watch that. He knows what he's talking about. Just as an aside, this isn't a comprehensive review about Unification. In case you didn't know, the Dawn of War Unification mod is an ambitious project that, well, unifies almost all of the mods that every modder under the sun has ever made for Soulstorm. That, of course, includes plenty of factions outside Soulstorm's 9 races, which includes the Nids, the Harlequins, the Admech, the Kriegers, the Vestroyan Firstborn, different flavors of Chaos Demons, different flavors of Space Marines, different flavors of Chaos Space Marines, new units and tiers beyond 3, namely 4 and 5, that adds massive walkers, tanks, and aircraft to the game, and many, many more. Is it balanced? Probably not. Is it fun? Definitely. The first time I tried to play with the Kriegers, the random AI faction I fought was World Eaters. While I was running through the game's first skirmishes, I noticed that while my troops lost their morale, they started going into melee range against the cultists and demons. At first, I thought it was some sort of coordinate battle frenzy that taunted my troops to force them into engaging in fisticuffs, but slowly the gears turned in my head and I realized, wait a minute, they're being lore-accurate Kriegers and diving headfirst into danger to serve the Emperor of Mankind in their final moments. But for little moments like this that got me hyped at the love and care the modders put into Unification, I get whiplashed by something so haphazardly put into the mod that I palm my face. It's at least charming, like Kirov's in the Vestroyan Firstborn faction, which definitely wasn't stolen from Murder Alert 2, or this Team Fortress 2 reference.
Oh, don't be such a person. It'll go back. No, it won't.
Oh, don't be such a baby. Lips grow back? No, they don't.
But before Unification was a thing, or at least before I tried and played Unification, Soulstorm led me to a window of opportunity for a wild and wacky ride into the rest of the 40k universe. After Dawn of War 2, I got to watch Ultramarines, a Warhammer 40k movie, which if you're familiar with it at all, you'd know that I regretted watching Ultramarines, a Warhammer 40k movie. The casting was so stacked with Terrence Stamp and John Hurt, rest their souls. However did they fuck that up? I'm not blaming the actors though, but bashing that movie is probably grounds for another video, so I'll move on. A year later, I got to experience Space Marine, the better Ultramarines story about how spacemen shoot bad guys with big gun, featuring everyone's now favorite Captain Titus. Crazy how Relic Entertainment was still behind that game, the same devs of Dawn of War. And it turned out as a pretty okay shooter slash slasher, all things considered. Afterwards, I got my first taste of Warhammer Fantasy in Vermintide, then Vermintide 2, then shortly learned after that Games Workshop did a massive oopsie destroying their first original universe for an attempt at a huge paycheck. Then I got into Total War Warhammer, which shows just how bad GW fucked up with blowing up fantasy that they had to go back to it eventually. Then I got into Darktide, and then Space Marine 2 happened, I read The Infinite and the Divine, then Fat Shark hit me up, and now I make content for them on occasion. But a bit before that, I made Space Marine Abridged. If you didn't know that existed, that's because it doesn't. Because shortly while editing Space Marine Abridged, I learned that Games Workshop was attacking parody creators like Otsu and Janovich. Even though I worked on that project for almost a year, I immediately got scared of getting demonetized and deleted my work immediately. It was heartbreaking. The worst part? It didn't matter in the end because I got demonetized anyway because my channel wasn't raking in the views anymore. And I get it. I haven't been making videos. Life's been happening on my end and I've been neglecting making content for you guys. And for that, I apologize. I really wanted to make Space Marine Abridged a reality, but it turned into a spiral of setbacks one after the other. The important bit is, though, that I'm still chugging. And Warhammer as a franchise is still driving me onwards. I am so passionate about this setting, this franchise. I'm blessed because I'm one of the lucky few who get to peek behind the curtain for Vermintide 2 and Darktide every once in a while. I recently got into streaming because there was a Twitch Drops event for Darktide, and I got affiliate just for streaming the game for 5 days. 5 days! Granted, I barely have enough followers to fill a classroom and I've got 0 subs, but I'll take what I can get at this point. I'm a happy guy. And to appeal to my original subscriber base, the Guilty Gear fans and fighting gamers, and folks who probably aren't too big on Warhammer in general, I've got a neat little tangent for you. Last one, I swear. When I first started to get into Guilty Gear, I wanted to dig into the setting's lore. The world of Guilty Gear largely has the same history as ours, but deviates heavily during the dawn of the year 2000. On one destined day, all electronic devices on Earth were invaded by what seemed to be sentient technology, and it declared to humanity, on every device, on every radio, computer, cellular phone, in every language, that in a matter of days, humanity will crumble. The United Nations soon outlawed technology, labeling some as black technology, but the Zep Empire refused to comply and instead started hoarding the tech. To the 40k fans listening right now, does this sound a bit familiar to you? Yup, you're right. It's the dark age of technology, then the cybernetic revolt, then the age of strife, but less grimdark and more anime. To add on top of that, the Death Corps of Krieg, my favorite Imperial Guard regiment, use helmets that heavily resemble World War I Pickelhaube that the Germans used. You know who else uses Pickelhaube? That's right, Potemkin, my main, and presumably the rest of the Zep army. I inadvertently picked my Guilty Gear main because of Warhammer 40k. And yes, I'm saying Zep is basically the Mechanicus and the Kriegers combined. To summarize, I have and will concede that Soulstorm isn't the best expansion content-wise for Dawn of War. If you want a good campaign, play Dark Crusade. Soulstorm on launch didn't bring much, just a cheaply made campaign with awful but memorable voice acting, weird flying units, and a couple of new factions that, as a whole, didn't really add that much to the table. But consider this. Soulstorm was also the first Warhammer media that some folks got to experience, me and my friend group included. Warhammer as a whole, and therefore Soulstorm, changed my life for good, and likely for good. It influenced what media I enjoy, a bit of how I perceive life, that despite the cruelty and horror that you face, sometimes you just have to grit it, bear it, and maybe even show kindness, because we don't actually live in the grim darkness of the far future where there is only war. Because of Warhammer, I tried to make my own contribution to the community with Space Marine Abridged, but backed off due to legal issues. I'm currently playing through Rogue Trader, enjoying every minute of the game and simultaneously reading through the Caiaphas K novels, laughing at him cowardly surviving an encounter with Tyranids by the skin of his teeth, and getting that misconstrued as heroism. Or maybe that's just his imposter syndrome getting in the way of his heroism. I love 40k and fantasy, and I'll probably get into Age of Sigmar 2 if I've pushed myself to. My body is ready to purchase Plastic Crack from GW, but my wallet doesn't agree, so I'll have to postpone that. I haven't even bought Dawn of War Definitive Edition yet, but I will. And I'll definitely buy Dawn of War 4, because I love this franchise.
fighting us orcs, who's technically having sex.